I'm sure many of you are already aware of the level of collaboration that already happens on a daily basis within the fraud fighting community. This is something which we see happen very, very well and in a very high level of value, where companies are working together to talk about the challenges they're seeing, to discuss the trends that they are seeing, and they are taking advantage of the fact that fraudsters work together. Fraudsters have no problem with sharing data. Fraudsters have no problem with letting other fraudsters know what's working for them and what's not. And therefore, the fraud fighting community really does the same thing and does it well. Just for a small example, we're all here today. That really is a small microcosm of how the community is working together. We do this so that when we stay up to date on what the trends are, we are giving ourselves that same advantage. And this helps fraud fighting teams, as we mentioned, keep up with latest trends and also take advantage of, if you're seeing somebody and I'm seeing somebody, obviously we can't share information, but we understand what patterns are taking place. And this helps us give a good experience to our good users and hopefully try and catch those fraudsters. But there's still some fundamental challenges in the way that we are working together. And fundamentally, as I mentioned, that comes from the fact that the average person today has tens, if not hundreds of applications that they use and know them on a daily basis. But every single time they go to that 101, 102 application, they've got to start proving themselves all over again. They need to validate their information. They need to prove that they are who they say they are. They do a one-time SMS or a two-step verification initiation. They get a one-time payment sent to their credit card, one of 100,000 things. And all of these companies essentially want to know, can we positively identify this person? When we're seeing this person, who else knows them? And the way that they've tried to solve this in the last few decades is by using third-party data providers. So if I have a business and I see someone for the first time, I would give that customer's information and I would give an amount of money to one of the many third-party companies out there that really act as middlemen, should we say. And they will take this data, buy this data, massage this data, and reply to you. But there are some fundamental problems with this model, and I'm sure I don't need to explain to all of you what they are. There is fundamentally a challenge with data freshness. By definition, if an identity is sitting on a database, it is old. It could be days old, it could be months old, it might be years old. But by definition, it's old information. There are challenges with reliability. You're not sure where this data came from. You're not sure how much you can trust it. There are a lot of challenges around data theft. And looking at some of the breaches that have happened over the last few years, it's no surprise that companies don't want to give their user data to these third parties. There are challenges with fragmentation, coverage, but primarily there's a fundamental challenge with privacy exposure. In order to use these tools, you need to give these companies your customers' personal data and your business data. You need to let them know how many customers you're onboarding. You need to let them know who those customers are and information about them. Now, I'm not going to dive into the GDPR and CCPA challenges here. They are many and they are sometimes onerous. These companies will often claim that they are GDPR compliant, but that's not the same thing as fully living to the letter of what GDPR is meant to be, which is a way to protect the end user's data, when essentially, by their very nature, these companies buy and sell that data. Now, the concept of providerless is built on the realization that there's actually hundreds of companies, thousands of companies in this same place. So yes, this one retailer is working hard with these third-party resources, but so are airlines, so are ride-sharing companies, credit cards, gaming companies, food delivery apps, and a whole slew of companies are using these middlemen and getting an imperfect solution. And what we realized was, if these companies could work together, if they could do so without sharing any data, then in theory, we should be able to remove these middlemen completely and then see what the landscape looks like when all the data you have is instant fresh. And to turn to this, the vast majority of providerless networks out there today are built on privacy enhancing technologies, which is an emerging technology group, which was actually named last year as Gartner's top strategic tech trend, which means that these companies are able to work together without exposing to each other any data whatsoever. So with a traditional providerless technology, these companies work together in a way that means that there is no middleman. There is no, data provider in the middle that's buying and selling their data. They're working directly together through a peer-to-peer technology. When you incorporate privacy enhancing technologies in the mix here, then what you're able to do on top of that is add absolute end user anonymity. So no end user data is ever shared or ever exposed across the network. Absolute requester anonymity, so nobody ever finds out who's asking the questions. Absolute voucher anonymity, so nobody knows who's answering the questions, and you're not even disclosing a response. So when you answer somebody else's question, not only do you not learn anything about the customer or learn anything about the business that's asking, not only do they not learn anything about you, you don't even know if you're answering positive or negative. So ultimately what happens is, going back to the way that we looked at this previously, we now have a situation where when I try to sign up for a new retailer, that retailer is able to ping my ride-sharing app, my food delivery apps, tens of other retailers that know me, my ride-sharing app, my computer gaming console, my messaging apps, and say to them, hey, who out here recognizes this user? Who out here knows that this user is real? And we build an instant consensus without a data provider being in the middle. And that's exactly why these are called providerless technologies. There is no data provider, there is no middleman. At Identiq, for example, we always say, we don't sell water, we build pipes. We are the only company in the fraud space that says, do not give us your data. We don't want it, we don't need it. You shouldn't trust us with it. In fact, you shouldn't trust anyone with it. Instead, we allow these companies to validate that when they see someone for the first time, that person is a real person. And not only are they a real person, they're using their real identity. And we can do that without exposing anything. So there's no more challenge of data freshness because you're pinging the live databases of the other companies on the network today. The groceries that I ordered to my house this morning can vouch for the fact that they know my home address, they know my credit card, they know my IP, they know my name. The rideshare that I took last night can vouch for the fact that, yeah, this is definitely his phone number, this is his device ID. We know that this is credit card and his email. The video streaming service that I watched for several hours more than I should when I got home last night can also vouch. This is his name, this is his credit card number. We know that this is his IP as of hours ago, even minutes ago. So there's an absolute change in the way that we look at data freshness. There's also no challenge of data leaks because there is no data. There is no Equifax in the middle collecting this data, which is asking for a fraudster to break into. We're also eliminating challenges of fragmentation and coverage because between the wider internet, we've probably seen multiple IPs, multiple credit cards used, multiple variations of your name or your phone number and your work email and your business email. So we're no longer looking at the old model of building a single identity. The question isn't, is this credit card stolen or not? The question is, how many people out there have seen this credit card in the past with trusted transactions and how many of those? And I sure I don't need to tell you, as no data ever leaves your domain, there is zero privacy exposure. And this is 100% GDPR, CCPA, and every other current form of privacy legislation compliant. Not in a, we've worked backwards to make ourselves compliant, but mathematically out of the box, you learn nothing new about the user that they didn't already give you. You just validate their information was correct. And you expose nothing when you ask a question. So to give you a really practical example of how this would work, let's say somebody came to you today, you're a bank, you're a credit card, you're a merchant, you're an online retailer, and someone comes to you for the very first time. You will collect the information that they give you. Again, you learn nothing new from us, but you will have the information they give you, name, email address, phone number, etc. And obviously you will collect other information yourself, such as perhaps their IP address, perhaps their device ID. And what you're then able to do is to use this data to create a one-time query that goes to the network. Now, I want to stress again, that query does not contain the customer's data. That data never leaves your site, but that query is sent to the network through a peer-to-peer network, and you get a response back that shows you the consensus of the network. So in a best case scenario, you would get a response back that says, yes, we know this email is a real email. It's not a synthetic ID. It's not something that's just been made up in the last 24 hours. It's not something with no information on it. There are 30, 40, 50 companies on the network who know this email, know that this is a trusted user, and have seen this email for years, perhaps decades. More than that, we can tell you this email is connected to this credit card. Your ride-sharing company, 10 other retailers, your grocery delivery company, your video streaming company, and 3 of the financial services that you use, be it a credit card or a bank or a payment gateway, can say, yes, we've seen this connected. We've seen this email address connected to a credit card multiple times over the last however many years. And the same is true with this phone number or this IP address or this device ID. There is a consensus that says that this is what a good user looks like online. They're known to many companies across a slew of industries. And for 99% of your users, your good users that come to you fresh, you can now give these users a seamless experience from day one. You no longer have to ask them to wait a week while you validate the data. You no longer have to ask them to make a one-time payment for the credit card. If you're running a marketplace or a ride-sharing company and people are trying to take money out, you can validate, yes, this is a legitimate payment instrument that we recognize belongs to this person, and make the whole onboarding or money taking out process 100 times easier for that 99% of good validated users. And for that 1% that doesn't tick all of these boxes, then these companies, you can give them the friction that you're currently giving to everyone. So this brings us to kind of the first value that we bring as a company, which is your good users get a significantly streamlined onboarding process from just the beginning. Now, this is just an onboarding use cases. There are other use cases that we cover that we'll get to as well. And that's the best case scenario. That's if everything from a providerless network comes back positive. On the flip side, unfortunately, sometimes it happens, the response you get looks something like this. And in here, in this case, what the network is telling you is, yes, this credit card is recognized on the network. There are multiple people that can vouch for the fact that they have seen this credit card on the network. However, it's never been seen associated with this email address, or this phone number, or this device ID. So even though the credit card itself has not been reported stolen, and it's not accurate to say this is a bad credit card, we know that it's never been seen connected to this account before. Which means that before a credit card is even reported stolen, we can give you the information that says there may be additional actions you want to take before allowing for this transaction to go ahead. Maybe you want to contact the person and double check they are who they say they are. It could legitimately be that they've given the credit card to a new spouse, a new boyfriend or girlfriend. It's possible that it's legitimate, but in these cases, your fraud teams are able to understand exactly where the red flag comes from, what the challenge is, and the fraud team is able to make decisions based on much wider and much more up-to-date data based on the crowdsourcing consensus on the network. And this brings us to our second value. As well as customers, good customers having a seamless experience, those red flags and orange flags are brought to your fraud team. And now they're only working on 1% of the traffic they were working on before. And in addition, they have the freshest, most up-to-date data when they make this decision. So if you're thinking about how this affects the bottom line of the business, which always where this needs to come back to, we believe fundamentally that if you focus on highlighting the good users, you have the biggest impact on the bottom line. For example, as a really oversimplification, today you have those customers that you approve. Most are good probably, but there's a few bad people in there. And you have those that you deny. Now, honestly speaking, probably half the ones you deny are really fraudsters, and the rest you just didn't have enough information to validate. With Identiq, as well as being able to take some of those people that you previously would have approved and say, hey, you shouldn't approve these people. More importantly, because you're using a providerless network, because you are able to validate positively, you can take a large chunk of those customers who previously you would have rejected and left their money on the table and given them a horrible online experience, and give them now that better experience that they deserved, being good customers. Maybe according to the credit card company, they're a thin file applicant. Maybe they're even a bank. Sorry, maybe they're even unbanked. But if they use a video streaming service, a food delivery service, if they have a coffee shop app on their phone, we are able to say, hey, maybe Equifax don't know them, but your peers do. And your peers can build a consensus that says, yes, we know this individual. Yes, we know they're real. Yes, the IP address that they're coming from now is the one that we know belongs to the real identity. Yes, this is their credit card. And until now, we've only really been talking about that one use case, the question of when you see someone for the very first time. But the truth is, there are multiple places where this works. So just for a small sample of the way that we're able to work, initially we mentioned there's identity validation at sign up, but perhaps you want to do a phone to name match. Perhaps you're seeing a phone number for the first time. Somebody asks for a one-time verification, or you're adding a two-step verification process and a new phone is added. We can tell you, hey, perhaps their ride-sharing company, their food delivery app, perhaps their dating app even can say, yep, that's definitely their phone number. It's also critical to be used at points of password reset protection, or when somebody's coming to say, hey, I've lost my password, I've been locked out of my account. We're seeing, for example, now in the travel industry, there are people who haven't logged into their account for a year or two, logging back in for the first time. They want to use up those points that they've been saving. And the first question is, hey, we don't know who you are anymore. We saw you 2 years ago. Since then, you've changed house, you've changed credit card. We are able to say, yes, you might not have seen them from 2 years, but your peers have. So when they request a password reset and you say, I have this IP address and this phone number who claims to be attached to this email address and this name, is that legitimate? The rest of the network, if it's good, can vouch for them. Again, I have to stress, without sharing or exposing any customer data at all. If somebody adds a new shipping address to a retail website, which is normally a time when you want to double check, because the first thing that I would do if well, not me personally, of course, but the first thing a fraudster would do if they broke into a retail account is to order themselves something that they can sell off. If they add a new credit card as well, you can verify the funding source. And don't forget, because this is private, because you're sharing and exposing no data whatsoever, you're able to validate information that you couldn't do until now. This is information which, until now, essentially you weren't able to validate because of privacy laws. So moving on, this is a wider industry, as we said. There are several companies out there offering solutions like this, built on this identity validation and built on these privacy enhancing techniques. We are going to be having a panel later on in the afternoon with our co-founder Uri Awad and some of our friends from companies such as Kiwi, Chime, and Uphold. And we encourage you to join us there, where we'll be able to talk about this much more and give us a few more practical examples about how this technology is working today. I thank you all for your time today.